and there's an arrow pointing to the current turn. And what happens when I skip my students? Okay, like if I'm laying these on a, I'm laying these out as basic lines on the table. I'll just take out the two. Okay, so you can see that your opponent is taking 3 turns in a row. If I have an extra turn, I'll just insert another basic line of the same color after my current turn, and so on and so on. I hope that's all right. I hope you understand that. Anyway, let's go on. What other words can we look for? Okay, prevent. Prevention is a replacement effect. Okay, it replaces damage dealing. Okay, with nothing. Okay, that means the damage dealing event doesn't happen. Like for example, pause for reflection. It prevents all combat damage. That means, okay, any like let's say for example, damage dealing triggers based off combat damage. Okay, they won't happen. And let's say, for example, for Stormwall Capridor, non-combat damage will be dealt to Stormwall Capridor, prevent that damage. And instead, you put a +1/+1 counter on it for each damage. Okay? So it replaces the damage deal. Oh, was that an elephant? The third one that we want to look at is regeneration. Okay, Ghost Ship, which was reprinted in what's that? Ultimate Masters, I think, and Patchwork Gnomes, which will be reprinted in the upcoming Double Masters. Regeneration is a replacement effect. It replaces destruction with removing all damage from the card and tapping the card. Is everyone still with me? Test. Is everyone with me? So far I'm connected, but hold on, I'm just checking technically. Is everyone? Oh, you can't see, is it? Can you see my slides? Right now, Sugeng and Rick says that they can't see my slides. No slide, huh? Okay, give me a moment again. Let me try resharing my screen again. Stop streaming. Try again. Is there anything now? Is there anything now?
I see your presentation.
Okay, so yeah, my connection has been very unstable since the morning. It has to be today, right? I mean, long weekend, everyone's at home. Okay, so should I go through the earlier slides, or I think I'll just continue. I don't think there's much happening. Okay, anyway, so these are some of the words that we can see to identify replacement effects. Okay, some keyword mechanics. Okay, some keyword mechanics, they are replacement effects. Okay, for example, riot in standard. And if we look back a bit older, there's dredge and there's tribute. Nobody cares about tribute. Anyway, we'll talk about Clamor Shaman and riot later, but we look at Dagmor Salvage. Dredge says if you would draw a card instead, you may put exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. Okay, so that's a replacement effect. If you do, you return this card from graveyard to your hand. Yeah, so sometimes you have to read carefully for certain keyword abilities. Keyword mechanics to identify whether they are replacement effects or not. Okay, if you look at the rules text, if you look at the rules text instead, okay, there are certain keywords that we can spot. Okay, to identify replacement effects. Okay, the first one is the word instead. Okay. Even so, the more common one is if and instead. Okay. You'll see this on way more cards than only instead. Okay. So this is one of the biggest indicators that it is a replacement effect instead of a triggered ability. Okay. If you see triggered ability, please sit around and wait for an event to happen. Okay, like for example, Iron Shell Beetle waits for coming to the battlefield, then you get a counter. Korean Dryad waits for somebody. Korean Dryad waits for you to play white, blue, black, or red spell, and he gets a counter. Okay. Mo waits for the event of putting counters on it, and you get an extra counter. Okay, the main difference here, is that Iron Shell Beetle and Korean Dryad says when and whenever, so we know that these are triggered abilities. Triggered abilities means that they can be responded to. Okay, so if an opponent deals 1 damage to it, it will die before it gets the ability. It will die before it gets counter. On the other hand, Mo says if it gets a counter, it gets an extra counter instead. Okay. In this case, let's say if you have an effect that puts a +1/+1 on it, it'll immediately be replaced by putting 2 counters instead. Okay, so if let's say an opponent wants to Grasp of Darkness it, it either has to do it before the +1/+1 counter ability resolves, or once counters are put on it, it'll already be bigger. It won't be killed by Grasp of Darkness. Another thing about if and instead abilities, they are also what we call self-replacement effects. Okay, these are a special subset of replacement effects. As I said in the beginning, these are the non-continuous effects of replacement effects. Okay, what it does, it replaces a part of the spell ability as it resolves. Okay, it only affects itself. Like for example, if you look at if the sacrifice creature's toughness was 4 or greater, instead you create 2 tokens. Okay, so it replaces itself the effect of creating 1 food token with creating 2 food tokens. Okay, same with Slaying Fire. If you spend 3 red mana to cast a spell, instead of dealing 3 damage, it deals 4 damage. Okay, the important thing about self-replacement effects, it doesn't mean that it doesn't only mean that this replacement effect affects myself, but it actually replaces the effect that the spell generates. I hope I make sense here. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. There are only 2 cards that has this thing. These are Vesuvian Shapeshifter and Acromorph Entity. I think we can safely disregard them now. I don't think we'll be seeing them anytime soon, other than from some weird EDH deck, but it has to be put here for completion's sake. Okay, finally we come. Yeah, I could appear in Masters or something weird like that, but they're not going to show up that often. Anyway, okay, so let's come to the main part of this presentation, which are the enters the battlefield replacement effects. Okay, there are 4 variants of these. We'll go through them. Okay, the first one is you see that this object, this permanent, this creature, enters the battlefield with something. Okay, examples from standard are Kite Troll. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, or like Boot Nipper. It enters the battlefield with your choice of a Death Touch counter or Lifelink counter. They will ask you for a choice. Second variant is X enter the battlefield somehow. Okay, for one Sentinel, battlefield tapped. Like you have a cycle of gain life lands, enter the battlefield tapped. Or like Captive Audience, it enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. Okay, again, these might require you to make a choice. The third one is as X enters the battlefield. For example, Heretic Banner, as it enters the battlefield, it asks you to choose a color. Blood Crypt, as it enters the battlefield, you may choose to pay 2 life, whether to decide whether it comes in play tapped or untapped. And finally, X enters the battlefield as something. These usually show up on clone effects like Mirror Maid or Spark Double. These are standard ones. The non-standard one is, what's the name again? As copies of Essence of the Wild. But usually they show up on clone effects. So, how are enter the battlefield replacement effects different than triggered abilities? I said earlier, the replacement effects, they don't use the stack and they don't generate priority. So, quick comparison: we have Truffle Snout and Barkhide Troll. They are both 2/2s. Truffle Snout, when enters the battlefield, you can choose to put a +1/+1 counter on it, or you can gain 4 life. Okay, let's ignore the gain 4 life for now. And let's compare that with Barkhide Troll. Okay, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so for Truffle Snout, it's when it is a triggered ability, and what it means that the opponent can respond to it. Okay, you can shock the Truffle Snout before I retrieve the counter, and of course, once you make the choice when you put the trigger ability on the stack, which means that you can't say, oh, okay, I gain 4 life. Okay, on Barkhide Troll, sorry, yeah. On the other hand, if you try to shock the Barkhide Troll, okay, it won't die. Why? Because it comes in with the counter. Okay, how I like to explain this thing to players is that there's no window of time when Barkhide Troll is on the battlefield and it's a 2/2. Okay, so Barkhide Troll's replacement effect. This enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Let me just highlight this. Okay, it replaces entering the battlefield with entering the battlefield with a +1/+1. Okay, so that's what the replacement effect does. This thing doesn't go on a stack. No player receives priority. Instead, you straight away get the +1 counter when it's already on the battlefield. Okay, let's try another example. Also, again, plugging my church tokens. Okay, you control these 3 things. Let's start poll, and we'll have about, I'll give everyone 30 seconds to fill up the answers. You can check the discussions channel where there's a poll. Each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1 play, and this battlefield under control is 1/1. Put 2 +1 counters on it. Okay, I'm going to give another seconds for everyone to just click the results. You can just click A, B, and C, or tap A, B, and C. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Draft. Okay, so let's look at Grumgully. Okay, Grumgully says each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, this is a replacement effect, and it replaces entering the battlefield with entering the battlefield with a +1/+1. Goblin is a non-human, so it will gain the benefit from Grumgully. So as far as we know, okay, it is it has +1/+1. Okay, like what we want. Okay, so when it comes in, it's already a 2/2. All right. So Sigil Captain's ability triggers only when the creature entering the battlefield is a 1/1. Okay, this is an ability with an intervening if clause, meaning that if the condition is met, it won't trigger at all. Okay, so what will Sigil Captain do? Oh, hey, where are my 1/1s? Okay, it won't see the goblin as a 1/1. It'll see it as a 2/2. Okay, so in this case, the goblin will come in as a 2/2, and when all the effects have resolved, which is basically only Grumgully's effect, okay, it will be a 2/2. The answer is B. Congratulations to the 2 people who got it right. Okay, I see that my timer here is about 25 minutes. Let's take a 5-minute break before we continue. Is that all right? Time on my clock now is 12:17. Let's all convene at 12:23. Is that all right? Okay. Thanks everyone for now. Let's do a 5-minute break. Come back at 12:23. All right. See you guys soon. Let me refill my water, and I'll catch you again in 5 minutes. For those who are still around, here are some pictures of my cats. Oh, their names are the black one is called Fazri. I call it Fazri. Yes, it is an actual Malay name, Fazri. I call it Fazri because it's so fuzzy. It's super fuzzy. Let's look at the. Do I have any recent photos of his fuzziness? Oops, no. Let's put that away. There you go. And the white one is called Spotify because her body is spotty. We actually gave her out for adoption. I think last month. I think. And there you go. I took this like 2 days ago. His tail is extremely fluffy. I think he's only like 6 months. Yeah. Anyway, I see that it is about time that we come back. Yes, Sugeng, I'm waiting for you to come here. All right, can I get a quick show of hands? See who's around. All right, so let's continue. Previously, we talked about end of the battlefield replacement effects. Okay, so yes, food tour in KL. Yes, please come when everything's settled. I'd love to bring you all around. Yeah. And now I finally got my own place to stay. I can host people also. Yay! Okay. Anyway, let's get back to this. All right. So just now we saw that for end of the battlefield replacement effects, there is no window of time for anything before that's supposed to happen. Okay, like for example, with Grumgully around, there's no window of time for the goblin to be a 1/1. For Barkhide Troll, there is no window of time where the Barkhide Troll is on the battlefield and is a 2/2. Okay, what else can we talk about under the battlefield replacement effects? Okay, they have to exist before the event occurs. It doesn't look back in time to replace other things. An example. This example is given in the comprehensive rules itself is Orb of Dreams. Permanents come into play. Permanents enter the battlefield tapped.
Oh, okay.
Is everything all right? Yeah, can I continue?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So Orb of Dreams says permanents come into play tapped. They enter the battlefield tapped. Okay. So if open the vaults, they bring Orb of Dreams and Memnite back together onto the battlefield. Would the Memnite come into play? That is no, because the Orb of Dreams isn't on the battlefield to replace the effect of Memnites coming in the battlefield tap. Okay. So since they come into play together, Orb of Dreams isn't around to check to replace anything. But of course, anything that comes later, they will. Rick, do you think you can mute your mic, Rick? I'm hearing slapping sounds from you. Better not be doing something naughty. All right. Okay. In any case, I'll just go on first. Okay. Another thing we have to consider when considering ETB replacement effects. Okay. Enjoy your cake. Happy birthday, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, enjoy your cake. Anyway, another thing that we have to consider about ETB replacement effects are objects that are moving across zones. Okay. In particular, reanimation effects. Okay, so remember that replacement effects, they apply before that thing actually enters the previous zone. Okay. One example that we can see is Rise Again. It returns target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And we have what happens if your graveyard only has Rhizome Lurcher? It says it enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Okay. So how big will Rhizome Lurcher be when it enters the battlefield from Rise Again? Remember, like as I said just now, okay, replacement effects, they apply before they actually happen. So when Lurcher's replacement effect applies, it is still not on the battlefield yet. Okay, so where is the card before it is on the battlefield? Okay, it is in the graveyard. So when you apply Lurcher will actually see itself in the graveyard, and it will come to play with 1 +1/+1 counter on it. All right. Another example is, okay, we are bringing cards. We are bringing multiple cards this time from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, let's say your battlefield has no creatures, and you cast Rise of the Dark Realms. It brings back Mirror Image and Elder Gargaroth together. If you have no other creatures on the battlefield, Mirror Image, when it tries to enter the battlefield, it will look at the battlefield for any creatures that you control. Okay, but since when it applies, there are none, it cannot copy anything. It can't copy the Gargaroth even though they are entered together. Okay, because when you apply the effect, it is still not on the battlefield yet. Okay, so next up, we will talk about replacement. Let me reorganize that. I'm a bit flustered. Let me take a sip. Okay, if you look at the comprehensive rules, there is a certain rule that talks about entering the battlefield, replacement effects entering the battlefield. Yes, hydration is important. Please drink your water. I hope you're drinking water just now. I forgot to remind you. Anyway, okay, this is the particular rule. Okay, Personally, to me, this rule is very intimidating because there's a lot of things going on. That's why I am presenting it in its full glory. Okay, CR 61412. Some of blah 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 blah. Okay, you can read it at your own leisure, but I'm not gonna read it. It's a lot of words. Okay, so when a ETB replacement effects wants to apply, okay, what happens? Okay? We have to look at a few things. What are these things? Okay, first off, we look at replacement effects, okay, that have already modified how it enters the battlefield. For example, if you get Mirror Maid, you may have Mirror Maid enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Okay. Let's say if Mirror Maid copies a creature, it copies an artifact, okay, it will consider itself to enter as an artifact. Okay. So in this case, Constellation, the trigger ability when an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, it won't trigger. Okay, because that is a replacement effect that modifies, okay, how it enters the battlefield. Next up, we have to look at continuous effects from the permanent's own static abilities. Okay, this one is a classic. Thassa and the rest of the Theros gods. Okay, it has a continuous effect that says, okay, as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. On the stack, it is a creature. But on the battlefield, if you only have, let's say, a Thassa's Oracle there, on the battlefield, it won't be a creature. So if your opponent has a Kinjali Sunwing that says creatures your opponent can control enter the battlefield tapped, as Thassa enters the battlefield, it will see itself as not a creature because the devotion is 5 or less. So it will enter the battlefield untapped. That means the Sunwing's effect won't apply to it. Okay, but on the other hand, if you have 2 Thassa's Oracle, or let's say if you have a certain ban card with 4 blue mana symbols, when Thassa is trying to enter the battlefield, it will check that, okay, you have 5 devotion, and that continuous effect that is not a creature, it won't apply. So it will enter the battlefield as a creature, and Kinjali Sunwing will see that it is a creature, and it will make it enter the battlefield tapped. Another example is Ixalit Jailer, and let's say you have Crucible of Worlds, and use it to play Simit Guildgate from your graveyard. So in the graveyard, Ixalit Jailer's ability applies. So in the graveyard, it won't have any abilities. But once you play it, it is going to go onto the battlefield. Okay. The game will see that, okay, when it's on the battlefield, it will enter the battlefield tapped. So in this case, Ixalit Jailer won't apply, and Simic Guildgate will enter the battlefield tapped. Finally, we have to look at, okay, continuous effects that already exist and would apply to the permanent. Actually, this condition and the previous one, they are almost similar. Generally, they go hand in hand. Okay, in this case, we have, okay, a Planeswalker from War the Spark, Arlinn, Voice of the Pack. It says each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. At the same time, you also have Arcane Adaptation, an enchantment from Ixalan. It says, okay, as enter the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other types. So let's say you choose Wolf with Arcane Adaptation, okay, and you cast Aegis Turtle. Okay, it is a Turtle 0/5 vanilla. So when it enters the battlefield, okay, the game will check ahead, okay, to see if there are any continuous effects that already exist and would apply to the permanent. Okay, in this case, Arcane Adaptation's continuous effect will apply to Aegis Turtle, which makes it a Wolf Turtle. Okay, which means that Arlinn's replacement effect will apply to the turtle, and the turtle will enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. What happens when you have multiple replacement effects? Okay, the order that they are applied is chosen by the affected player or the affected object's controller or owner if there's no controller. Okay, so this can be a little bit tricky, okay, because the controller of the effect might not be the affected player. Okay, usually, if when it is, no problem, but sometimes it's not. Okay, that's where the confusion arises. Okay. Secondly, if multiple players have to choose the order, we choose it in active player, then non-active player. Okay, and unlike triggers, they don't resolve in reverse orders. Instead, they just straight away apply. Okay, so let's look at some examples. This is my favorite EDH cycle. If you see me playing EDH, I'll definitely play this cycle. So you have Words of Waste and Words of Wilding. Once you activate their ability, they generate a replacement effect that replaces your draw with a different ability. If you activate both of these abilities once, okay. So what happens during the next time when you draw a card? Okay, both replacement effects will try to replace it. Okay, let's say if you activate this during your upkeep and during your draw step you draw a card, what happens? Okay, when you draw a card during your draw step, these two replacement effects will try to apply to this event. Okay, what you will do is you get to pick one of these effects and apply it. Okay? For example, let's say we apply Words of Wilding. So instead of drawing a card during your draw step, you create a bear token. Okay? So Words of Waste will still try to apply its effect to it, but right now, okay, you're already not drawing a card, so it won't apply. Of course, the converse is true. If you apply Words of Waste first, you let your opponent discard a card, Words of Wilding will try to apply, but since you're not drawing any more cards, it won't get to apply. But it is still around. So let's say your main phase you cast Orb or something, you'll get to apply the other replacement effect. Here's another example when the affected player might not the effect's controller. Okay, you control Torbrand, which says if a red source you control will deal damage to an opponent, or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. You also control Fiery Emancipation. If a source you control will deal damage to a permanent player, it deals triple the damage to the permanent player instead. So you, the mono red player, casts Shock on your opponent. So right now we have two effects that try to apply the damage dealing event from Shock. Okay, but who gets to choose the order of the application? It is your opponent. Okay, because your opponent is the affected player. Even though you control all three cards, so your opponent will get to choose to apply Torbrand first or Emancipation first. Let's quickly look at how they will be different. Okay, so if you apply Torbrand first, what happens is you get 2 and you get +2. Okay. Then you apply the Emancipation times 3, which means that it is 4 times 3 equals 12. Yay, teacher Z's math class. On the other hand, if you apply Fiery Emancipation first, you do the times 3 first, then you +2, you get 8. Okay, so there is a difference here, and less experienced players might get tripped up over this. Okay, some players may try to take advantage. Oh, I shock you, you take 12, but it is actually the affected player who gets to choose. Okay, we'll look at this scenario again later. Okay, still at multiple replacement effects. Sometimes you have to choose the order in a certain way. They are a bit like layers, but in this case, they are replacement effects, and thankfully, it is a lot less things for you to look through. Okay. This is the order in which you apply multiple replacement effects. Okay. First off is self-replacement effects. We've gone through that just now. An example is Anax. Okay. When it or another creature dies, you create a 1/1 red setter token. if the creature has power 4 or greater, you create 2 of those tokens. This is a self-replacement effect. Okay. So if the effect has any of these, you apply these first. Next up are control replacement effects. These are simply replacement effects that says the word control. Okay, like for example, crafty card purse. Okay, each token that would be created under an opponent's control this turn is created under your control instead. Okay, so you notice it is replacement effect because it has instead and it has the word control. Thirdly is copy replacement effects. Okay, for example, Essence of the Wild. Creatures you control enter the battlefield as a copy of Essence of the Wild. Okay, or like as we've seen just now, Spark Double, Mirror Maid. Okay, it is a replacement effect and it has the word copy inside. And finally, all your other replacement effects. Might be a bit too late, but can I just say RE instead of replacement effects? It just trips me up. Okay, so if you have multiple REs, this is the order to apply to them. Okay, let's look at a brief example here. Okay, again, you control Divine Visitation, sneaky player you, and you cast Sapperling Migration with Kicker. Okay, so in response, your opponent casts Crafty Cut Purse. Okay, it has flash. That's why I'm showing it's flashing in. Okay? The card is Crafty Cut Purse. You saw it just now. Okay, so what happens after everything resolves here? Okay, let's try to apply. Let's try to walk through this entire thing. Okay, so we know that Sapperling Migration here has a replacement effect. Okay, this thing here. Okay, if the spell was kicked, you create 4 of those tokens instead. Okay, this is a self-replacement effect. Okay, let's identify all the replacement effects first. Okay, Divine Visitation. It's not self. It's not control. Okay, because the effect here doesn't have control. Yes, it says control here, but that's the event that it's looking for. So this is an other effect. Crafty Cut Purse. Okay, the effect has control, so it is a control effect. Okay. So when it resolves, this is what will happen. Okay, Sapperling Migration will try to create the 4 tokens under your control. Okay, we apply the self effect first. Okay, instead of creating 2, you create 4. Done. Next, there is a control effect. So we have to apply the control effect. So instead of these 4 going to you, they go to your opponent. Okay, done. Let's try to apply Divine Visitation's effect. Okay. Oh, Divine Visitation says if 1 or more creatures tokens will be created under your control. But right now, tokens are already under your opponent. Okay, so this one doesn't get to apply. So the end result of this is your 4 Sapperling tokens. They will be created under your opponent's control. Okay, they won't be angels. All right, so clear this one. So this is how we apply multiple replacement effects. Okay, let's look at a very similar example. Okay, I picked this because Sugan was telling me that there was this very interesting interaction. So instead of crafty card burst, what if you have gather specimens? Okay, gather specimen says if a creature would enter the battlefield under an opponent's control this turn, it enters the battlefield under your control instead. Okay, what happens? Same situation, but instead of your opponent flashing in crafty card burst, he casts gather specimens. Okay, same thing. This is a self. This is a what was it again? Control. This other. Okay, so same thing. This will apply first. Instead of creating 2, you create 4. Okay. What happens next? Does it come into the battlefield? Okay. This one, the application is a bit different. Okay, because this act of creating the tokens happens here. Okay. if one or more creature tokens will be created under control. Okay, so this thing will actually apply first in inverted quotes, because even though it is the same action, okay, if you look at the text, okay, because the act of creating the tokens means that you have to create them first, then you put them on the battlefield. Okay. So we will actually apply divine visitation first. Okay, they will all be angels. Only then they will enter the battlefield under an opponent's control. Okay, so in this case, your opponent will get 4 angels. Okay, so yeah, so if you look carefully at the wording, Crafty Cut Purse applies during the creation, and Gather Specimens applies to the enter the battlefield. Okay, there is a difference, but it's an important difference. Whether your opponent gets to hit you for 4 or for 16. Okay, if you look at the rule regarding this, this is the rule under the ability word create. Okay, if a replacement effect applies to a token being created, that effect applies before considering any continuous effects. Okay, but if it applies to a token entering the battlefield, you have to create first, then you enter the battlefield. Hello, everything okay? So far so good, huh? Okay, so that is generally the section about that is generally the technical part of my presentation. Next up, we'll go to the customer service part of our presentation. Okay, we'll talk about answering players' questions. Okay, this is particularly important because right now, with things going around in the world, okay, we don't have that many live judge calls that we can handle. But instead, what we have is, okay, you have a lot of, let's say, like online discussion groups on Facebook, or in your local players WhatsApp group. Okay, oh, player A says, oh, I have a question, and player B says, oh, okay, I know the answer. It's because of this. And as we can see, that there are several intricacies of REs that make them a bit tricky to explain. Okay. Of course, when players try to be helpful, we can't stop them from being helpful. But of course, whenever possible, we'll try to correct them using the correct terminology that they should use. Okay. So as we've seen so far, they work a little different from all the other more common, in inverted quotes again, effects. The more common, as in the one that are more obvious. Okay. What we know that, okay, is that they don't use the stack, they don't require priority, and they cannot be responded to. Okay. So in this case, they are unlike triggers. Okay. Even though both of them work the same way, they wait for an event to happen and they try to do something else. Okay. Again, unlike spells or abilities, okay, they don't resolve in the sense that it doesn't resolve like a typical spell or ability. Those, they give you priority to respond, and after priority passes, they resolve. But in replacement effects, they don't. They just straight away get it. Okay, and like as I mentioned earlier, this is the trickier one. It is the affected player and not the controller of the effect that chooses the order of the application. Okay. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this section is because I saw this very interesting thread in one of the MTG groups. Okay, it's a simple question. We actually discussed about it just now. Okay, player asks, if I have both Torbrand and Fiery Emancipation on the field and I bolt my opponent, how much damage am I dealing? Okay, so I'm pretty sure by now you should know how to answer the question. It depends on how the order of the REs are applied, and of course, who gets to choose the order. It is the affected player, which is the opponent. Okay, in this case, they can either do 3 times 3 plus 2, or they can do 3 plus 2 times 3. Both of them give different answers. So the bolt can either deal 11 or the bolt can either deal 15. Okay, so we've gone through that just now. No problem. We understand how it works as judges. But of course, since this guy asks this question in a public Facebook group, what happens is you get 274 comments. Are there so many different answers, or are they just one fella giving the answer and the other 270 plus players say, "Oh, yay, good answer, good answer"? No, actually, most of the replies are replied by players, and they can't actually explain the reasons very well. Okay, let's try to go through some of these replies, and we can try how to explain to these players, like, oh, why these explanations are wrong. First one, guy replies, you can pick the order that the triggers go on the stack. So if Torben triggers first, you do 15. If Emancipation triggers first, 11. This reply gets 4 likes. Okay, let's look. Okay, let's see. Okay, what did the player get right and what did the player get wrong? Okay, does anybody want to share your answers? What did this guy get right and what did this guy get wrong? I'll just give another 10 seconds. See if anyone wants to type anything. Okay, I see Sugeng typing. I'll just wait for you to finish typing. Okay, so anyway, let's come back to this. Okay, what he got right was, yes, the order matters. It either deals 15 or deals 11. Okay, but what he got wrong is, first of all, they are not triggers. Okay, they don't go onto the stack, and you are not the one choosing. Okay, so if let's say I have to come in and explain to this player that that's not how it works, these are the things that I'll have to say. Okay, these are not triggers, they are repeating effects. Okay. They don't go on the stack, and you're not the one choosing. Okay, but you got the 15 or 11 correct. And of course, in a tournament setting, how do you do it? We'll look at the tournament setting thing later. Okay, there's a particular one. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this guy says Bolt deals 9, Torben deals 6, which equals 15. This guy got an angry react. Okay, so what did he get wrong here, and what did he get right? Anybody wanna try saying? All right. So, what he got right, actually, what he got half right is that yes, it deals 15. Okay, but we also know that hey, it can actually deal 11. And what he got wrong is, okay, Torben itself doesn't actually do damage. Yes, Sugeng, you got it right. Okay, Torben itself doesn't do damage. What happens is Torben modifies how much damage. It's not 2 sources of damage. Okay, guy says, regardless of how you order, it's 15 damage. What happens if this is a live call? Okay, let's say you hear 2 has Torben and Fire Emancipation, and you pose to your opponent. Okay, and the opponent is like, and the player who plays it says, oh, you take 15. Okay, regardless of how you order it, it's going to be 15 damage. Okay? So will you interfere in this case? Should you do any interfering? Like would you pause the game and explain to them? Let me create a poll here. Let's see. Poll: will you interfere? Yeah. No. Okay. Would you step in and say that? Oh, that's not how it works. If that's all you know. Okay, Felix says yes. You'll step in to explain to the players. Anybody else want to respond? You to explain why Anyone? No? Oh, Sugeng? And Stephen. It's all right, I'll wait for you to type. Yeah, so Stephen will go there and explain. All right, so there was no problem. Yep, that sounds like what we can do. Okay, so how about this player though? I mean, if when he says, regardless of how you order, it's 15 damage. Okay. Is there any? Would you conduct an investigation? Maybe is there any infraction or is there any penalty? Okay. So in this case, yeah, I'm almost out of time, so I think I'll consider investigating this player, because if after the investigation we know that he also doesn't know works, okay, this will be considered a CPV, communication policy violation. There won't be any penalty, but we'll roll back to the choice when the REs are being applied. Okay, so lastly, I would like to plug this group, the MTG Ask the Judge group, in case you haven't joined. There, responding in seconds. They are very fast, trust me. And yeah, so if right now you are stuck at home and I want to help people with their rules questions, this is where you can go. Is the Ask Judge group. If I'm not mistaken, it is created by Phil from the place you sharpen your rules knowledge and your lightning fast reflexes. Yeah, so that's all from me. Thank you everyone who joined in. Thank you for your attention, and thanks to Sugeng and Ben for helping with the slides. This presentation is actually based off Sugeng's previous presentation on replacement effects, and thanks for Ben for providing me the feedback. And of course, thanks to Felix and Mark and Stephen as well for setting up the conference and helping me with any technical problems. All right, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.